All right, so let's start the show a little bit different this week. Seeing that I've been lying on my deathbed for the past week, void of all responsibilities. I've had the flu, so that is the reason that this episode is coming to you late. That is the reason for the lack of content this week. Is basically this is the first time I've been able to get up and move around. But the fortunate thing about laying in bed for the last 3 days was I was able to catch up on NXT this past week. Now, NXT is one of those anomalies to me where I get to hear you guys talk about all the good things. You guys constantly are telling me good things about NXT, and because I don't have the time to watch a third brand of wrestling, I just have to take your guys' word on it. And it's funny that when I bring up the conversation, which I do regularly, about which is the best brand of professional wrestling in WWE, which obviously is still SmackDown, by the way. I'm not going to argue that with you guys. Y'all can say all the crazy shit you want. SmackDown's the best brand of wrestling. But when I do bring up that conversation, inevitably, there are a few outliers who always throw NXT into the conversation for best wrestling brand on television. So I got the opportunity to sit down and watch this week. I went back and watched the premium live event. I watched the week before, and I watched this week's episode because I wanted to see what is all of this hype about. And I will say, I will be truthful, inside of a vacuum, to an untrained wrestling eye, I can see that as a wrestling fan, how you could get enamored with the intimate nature of NXT. NXT has a pace that is very suited for what I would call younger casual wrestling fans. It is very much the TikTok of professional wrestling. It moves at a very fast pace. They tell like 100 stories in the 2 hours that they're on television. And another positive is NXT has genuine character work. I can see the effort put into character building. You see cowboys, you see guys in masks, you see punk rock chicks, you see a Tiger King. There's an element of being grounded in gimmicks that is very easy to understand and follow when you watch NXT. And I also think that there is this intimate nature of it being in a small physical building at a regular location that gives off this energy that the crowd is just always fully engaged with the product. And I think that's intoxicating. I think that if you watch that, it intoxicates you and it's an attractive visual to anybody who's watching NXT. And that's all great. Those are all great qualities of professional wrestling. The problem is that NXT doesn't exist inside of a vacuum. And inside of a vacuum, it would be easy to mistake NXT as the best brand of wrestling on television. But the truth is, NXT does not exist in this vacuum. And here's the catch. And maybe you have to be a connoisseur of casual like myself to be able to catch these small elements, but there's a harsh reality to watching NXT, and that is the wrestlers are green, and they're protected, and they're robotic. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because at the end of the day, outside of this vacuum, it's not really fair to compare NXT to the main roster, because I could just watch one episode and it's blatantly clear to me that what I've said all along has never been truer. NXT is developmental wrestling. You can have the greatest stories. You can have the most likable characters. You can have high energy, big spot matches, which, by the way, feel eerily similar to what we see in AEW. But at the end of the day, from an entertainment standpoint, from just breaking it down to its truest form, NXT is still very green wrestling. And all you have to do is use a simple eye test. It's simple. If you take one of the NXT superstars and you pluck them out of that company and you put them in the ring with a main roster superstar at any level, let's say Seth Rollins, let's say CM Punk, let's say Roman Reigns, let's say LA Knight, how do they stack up? Do they pass the visual test? Can they talk their way into a big match? Do they look the look and do they walk the walk to belong in the main roster ring? And as I watched NXT this past week, I just couldn't see that with most of the superstars. I didn't see any that were in that position. Now, once again, Here's the reality. They're not supposed to be. This is where they take the time to grow. That is why I believe the main roster is so stacked right now, is because you have these guys who are given the proper amount of time on NXT to hone those skills and become who they are. And I understand that if you take this argument out of context, it's going to look like I'm shitting on NXT. But you have to remember, in context for what I'm talking about right now, I'm being told that these guys are putting on the best show in all of professional wrestling right now. But let's use the eye test. Cora Jade. She absolutely has the look. Phenomenal look. She's going to turn heads. But when you put a microphone in Cora Jade's hands, she still needs time. She reminds me a lot of Liv Morgan. Somebody who has all the visual intangibles that you need to be a big star, but she's just not there on the microphone. You can't put her in the ring right now with a Charlotte Flair, a Bianca Belair, a Becky, an Asuka, Io. She just doesn't have that magnitude of stardom yet. And I know the argument that's going to come my way, that there are people currently on the main roster right now like Shotzi, and I use Liv Morgan as an example, who really can't stand on that level either. And my counter argument to that is, yeah, Vince McMahon brought a lot of people up to the main roster too soon. So then we talk about someone like Trick Williams, who I think is likable as shit. I really think Trick Williams has a big future ahead of him in the WWE, but he still needs time. If you pay attention closely and you don't become enamored with the intimacy of NXT, you can see that Trick Williams is still very robotic inside of a ring. He feels like he's reading from a script. He feels like he's been programmed to talk and act a certain way. He does not look completely comfortable in his own skin at this time, which is, once again, perfectly fine because these guys have time to develop. Then you move on to someone like Carmelo Hayes, who I feel like is probably a guy that is very close to being ready for that next level. I think he's very close to being ready for the main roster. But here's, you have to be realistic when you talk about this, in the fact that when Carmelo Hayes gets called up, it's not going to be to main event SmackDown or Raw. He's going to be on the mid-card part of the show. And so what we have to be realistic about is the top talent right now in NXT is maybe mid-roster talent on the main shows. And that's okay, once again, because, like I said, that's where you're supposed to be. But you can't compare one show, NXT, to Monday Night Raw and SmackDown when the top talent from that first show is not equal to the top talent. It just doesn't add up. Now, the one person who wasn't on NXT this week, but who I think, Braun Breaker, I believe, he's got all the intangibles. I think Braun Breaker's ready. You can move Braun Breaker up right now, and I think he could hold his own in most main event pictures on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown. So there's an exception to every rule, but there's not 15 Braun Breakers running around NXT right now. I'm not sold on Ilya Dragunov, and I know a lot of people are, and I know that a lot of people think he's the next big thing to come out of NXT, but I can't see what Ilya Dragunov does at an elite enough level that puts him on the map on the main roster. I can see why people think he's good. I just don't see that intangible thing that gets him over on that next level. To me, from an eye test, he reads small on the screen. And I know he's not that much smaller than a lot of other guys. It's just a visual thing to me. He reads as a small superstar. And small guys have to have a special element that gets them over when they reach that main roster. And I just don't see it with him. At 5'10", you have to wow people. You have to do one thing extremely good. He's not going to stand across the ring right now from someone like Gunther and command respect long-term based on his mic skills, based on his look, based on his ability to wrestle. He does everything well, but I don't think he does anything exceptional. Look at Johnny Gargano, a guy who I would say does a lot of things extremely well, but he's never broken up to that next level on the main roster. Even guys like Bryan Danielson were just another guy until he kind of found that thing that took him to the next level, and he forced his way into a top spot. I don't know what Dragunov has to appeal to the crowd, to a casual fan base. I get how he appeals to hardcore fans, but this is not AEW. I think if we're having the conversation about Ilya Dragunov moving up and progressing into AEW, sure, I think he's the next big thing. But I think to move up to that main roster WWE superstar, you have to have something that makes you a little cachet, something that makes you pop a little bit. You know, how does Ilya Dragunov, how does he sell the t-shirt on the main roster? Because I don't see it. How does he get on the poster? How does he get on the magazine cover, the program cover? You know, how does he get on the napkins at Party City for the WWE birthday parties? Right now, Dragunov just doesn't have that it factor that is going to take him to that next level. Now, does he have time to figure it out? 100%. Like I said, if we're having this conversation in a vacuum, Ilya's on the right fucking path. But when you're comparing NXT to Monday Night Raw or to Friday Night SmackDown, we have to be realistic. I'm sure 100% that Dragunov is going to figure it out. I'm sure that he will become entertaining and figure out that it factor at some point, but it's not there right now. And case in point is put Ilya Dragunov next to Logan Paul, a guy who's had a handful of wrestling matches, and you tell me who is the more marketable superstar that most of the audience is going to pay to come see. It is not Ilya Dragunov. It is Logan Paul. It is marketing. It is entertainment. Logan Paul does certain things extremely well, like market himself. And so that is the argument that has to be made when you're comparing these two shows. When you're saying that NXT is the top brand, you have to show me champion for champion why that makes sense. And I can understand, I can see how there's a lot of people are going to go, this is another nerdy D Debbie Downer conversation. And I don't want this to feel this way. Like, NXT is the future of WWE, and the future is secure. When you look at all of these names like Cora Jade, Dragunov, Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker, like the future is beautiful for WWE. I'm not mad. It's just going to take time, and I'm not willing to crown this set of superstars the best thing on television. They're not as strong as the main roster is. I can't draw that line of comparison to say out loud that NXT is competing with the television show that is on one of the major networks. I think that is silly. I can see why it is some people's favorite, especially people who tend to lend themselves a little more, they may be casual, but they lend themselves a little more into the world of the IWC. I see how you guys could like it, but I can't draw the line. I can't draw the line because I still see amateur versus professional wrestling in my eyes. It is the G League of wrestling. As a basketball person, the only comparison I can draw is it's like going and sitting in a G League basketball game and a guy scores 35 points and has 20 rebounds and you go, oh, that guy's amazing at basketball. That guy is definitely going to be good at the next level. No, that guy is good at the level he's on, and the level he's on is definitely not as high as the NBA, and so he will have to prove himself at that next level. So acting like these NXT guys, yes, there's a lot of energy in that building. There are some extremely good stories. There's extremely good character work. But when you break it down and you look closely and you're objective, you can see that a lot of these people are still absolutely green in the ring. I can't see myself going to moving from this point and going, NXT is must watch to me. It's just not. There's just too many minutes of television of guys popping on screen that I've never seen before. It reminds me a lot of AEW, which though when this is what this is designed to do, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's what NXT is designed to do. It's designed to kind of introduce us to new people, but I don't have the time for that. There's too many breakout star matches, too many up-and-comer, too many different, it feels like they're testing a lot of things in NXT. I just live under the assumption that once Triple H feels like something is worthy for someone of my caliber of fandom to watch, he will bring that up to a show that matters, a Monday Night Raw or a Friday Night SmackDown. But shout out to you guys. I will say, shout out to you guys who are able to watch NXT and you love it for what it is, and you even claim it to be the best brand in wrestling. I get it. I'm just not willing to put a crown on something that isn't what I consider to be the big boy in the room.